come out.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I wish you could stay too, kid. You're an asset to the personnel.
She's a master gardener also. She's a smart girl, yeah.
Okay, looks like we have enough peeps here. Good morning and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting. First order of business is to approve not last month, but September's committee meeting minutes. Motion made by Supervisor Simpson, seconded by Supervisor Frazier. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay. First item, privilege from the floor. It doesn't look like we have anybody here. So we will move on, and just to give you people a little recap of what happened in September, we did have Don Boyajian, who works with the Simmons Hanley Conley national law firm. Don Boyajian is he's got his own law firm in Saratoga, but they are working with this national group to try to garner some monies in this opioid litigation for certain counties. As it stands right now, there are roughly 7, as we knew of last month. There may be more by now. But at any rate, we did hear from them, and just to highlight some of the items that they had, there are, a couple of things we need to figure out. First of all, if we want to do it, and then second of all, with who. We can potentially go on our own, which, quite honestly, Mary and her group has quite the plate ahead of them, so I'm not recommending that. But the other 2 companies that we will hear from today will give us 3 to choose from. The group that we heard from last month actually was, there was a litigation back in 2003. They were representing 5,000 claimants, and they were successful in settling for over $75 million. They also outlined that the financial aspects of the opioid crisis was $40 billion in lost productivity, $26 billion in health insurance claims, $7.6 billion impact on the criminal justice system, and slightly under $3 billion for substance abuse treatments. So, if any of these companies, I'm hoping, if they're unsuccessful, will not charge us for anything other than the time that it requires to get some data from certain personnel here at the county. We did hear from Don Boyajian that they are going to be looking for a 25% collection if they are successful. So those were just some of the highlights that I wanted to refresh your memory with. And with that being said, if there aren't any questions or comments, I would like to turn this over to the Brindisi, Murad and Perlman law firm. Louis Brindisi is standing, so I'm going to give you the floor, Louis, if there's no other questions or comments from the committee.
I'm here with my partner, Bob Julian. Bob is one of the consortium of attorneys that we have joined together with. The other is John Cherundolo, the Cherundolo Law Firm in Syracuse, New York. Bob is a past majority leader of the Oneida County legislature for over 20 years, a former Supreme Court judge, now practices law in Syracuse and Utica. I practice out of Utica, New York. I've been doing this for like 57 years. Tried all kinds of cases all over the country. John Cherundolo, my partner in this consortium, is also a former Supreme Court justice. He's on trial today, so he could not make it. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to appear before you so that we can tell you our thoughts in regards to the opioid litigation. I know that Don has been here before, and I've known Don for years, and I know of the Simmons Hanley Law Firm. The retainer agreement that I sent to your county attorney is basically the same fee structure as Simons Hanley, because when we got together, we decided that we weren't going to charge any more than any other law firm that would appear in front of you. So I think the fee structure in our retainer agreement is the same fee structure in the Simons Hanley agreement. Just to talk to you a little bit about the retainer agreement before I get into the opioid discussion, you have complete control over the litigation. Before we would do anything, we would come back to the board and to your county attorney, work along with her, and prior to the time any papers were filed, they would have to be approved by her and by the board. We would not make any expenditures that over $3,000 without permission of the board or your county attorney. And as I said, you completely control the litigation. You know, there's a 10-day notice that if you didn't want us to represent you anymore, they would just notify us in writing, and that would be the end of the representation. The reason why I think you should pick our law firm is we're upstate, and we have Oneida County, we have Onondaga County. We've been promised the city of Utica and the city of Syracuse. So we're working on Monroe County as we speak. I met with the mayors in Herkimer County last week, and I know that they will be joining our group at some point in time. We also have counties in Pennsylvania that we're representing in this litigation. But just to give you some background, drug overdose deaths are now the leading cause of accidental death in the United States. We surpass all deaths by motor vehicle accidents, guns, and HIV infection. I'm not sure how much of this Don went through with you, but if it's repetitious, let me know, and I'll try to circumvent it. The opioid litigation, or the situation, is getting worse and not better. And I just wanted to go through this with you a little bit to tell you the reason why we're getting involved in this litigation. I've had this problem in my own family, and this is something that's near and dear to me, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get involved originally. All of my waking hours for the last few months have been geared towards this litigation. We have thousands and thousands of documents to substantiate what we think will be a successful litigation. The opioids are good for what they call palliative care. They're end-of-life drugs, you know, where they treat the pain and they don't treat the disease. There is no known study in existence, and the FDA never approved these drugs for long-term use, and that's part of the basis for this litigation. Over the last 2 decades, as prescriptions for opioids began to soar, rates of addiction and overdose deaths increased. According to the latest survey data, over 119 million people took prescription drugs, painkillers, in 2016. Of these, 19 million did so without being directed by a doctor. And this whole thing started back in the 1980s, and what occurred is that there was a letter that was sent to the New England Medical Journal, in which one of the doctors indicated that he had done a study in a hospital, and it says, the opioid crisis, the letter that started it off, okay? You can go on Google and you can get this information yourself, but this letter that was sent to the New England Medical Society started this whole thing, because the doctors in this letter indicated that it was okay to use these opioids for long-term care. Since this letter was published, these doctors have debunked the notion that it should be used for long-term care. And once they started once they got this letter, that's when Purdue Pharma decided that they were going on this marketing spree and selling OxyContin and hydrocodone. The United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention says the number of fatal drug overdoses in 2016 was expected to top more than 64,000 people, more than the troops that we've lost in Vietnam. And they were most of these deaths involved in opioid, either an illegally prescribed narcotic or an illicit drug like heroin or fentanyl. Last week I attended a mass tort convention in Las Vegas, and I'm a member of the Mass Tort Trial Lawyers Association, top 25. I think you have our CVs, but there was 800 attorneys that attended this convention, and we were with some of the biggest law firms in the country, and we are working with some of the biggest law firms in the country. Not just the Simmons Hanley law firm. I don't know if they're part of this group that I'm associated with, but we've talked to Motley Rice. Joe Rice has got Albany County. I had a discussion with him last week. Mike Papantonio, the Levin Papantonio law firm out of Tallahassee. These are law firms that started the tobacco litigation years and years ago, and they settled for like almost $300 billion. I am working along with this group, and what we decided to do is to exchange all information that we receive through discovery and whatever. And we've decided to file complaints. And the complaints are going to be against the distributors who violated the Federal Controlled Substance Act by failing to alert the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration of suspicious opioid purchases, such as orders of unusual size, frequency, or pattern. The claims against the manufacturers, and we have these complaints already prepared, are going to allege basically that they engaged in fraudulent and misleading marketing. The Attorney General's 41 U.S. states have now banded together to investigate the makers and distributors of these opioid painkillers. And they have subpoenaed all these records that are in their files from the pharmaceutical companies, which means that these records are going to be at some point made public and given to all the attorneys that are handling this type of litigation. The subpoenas have been brought against Endo International, and if you look at the proposal that we sent you, we listed a group of defendants that we were going to be bringing actions against. Endo, Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Teva, Cephalon, Allergan, and Purdue Pharma. Purdue Pharma is the maker of OxyContin. And it's funny, there's a little history involved here. It's run by the Sackler family. The Sackler family consisted of 3 psychiatrists out of Brooklyn, New York, who bought a pharmaceutical company that dealt with laxatives, and somehow or another, for $40 million, they got the patent for OxyContin. OxyContin today brings in $3.2 billion a year for the Sackler family. The actions that we're going to be starting will be against these defendants and also against the distributors, Amerisource, Bergen, Cardinal Health, and McKesson. And according to the Institute, these 3 companies have more than $400 billion in revenue last year and manage about 90% of the country's national drug distribution. How does this affect your county? Okay. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. we would ask if we are permitted to represent you that we be allowed to send in our forensic accountants to sit down with each and every department to find out exactly what the damages are for this particular county. But these are some of the damage: public safety, increased costs of law enforcement, 9/11 services, emergency medical services and fire departments, as well as other governmental departments and agencies charged with protecting citizens' general welfare. Social services, family and children services, services and costs related to the homeless, healthcare, addiction treatment, mental health services, coroner services, indigent burial, as well as other services related to maintaining the basic fabric of families in the community. Court costs, public defenders' cost of prosecution, and other costs that are related to increased crime due to the opioid addiction. I went online, and here in Warren County, you've had a lot of problems with addiction. And I looked at an article, and I guess this Lieutenant Stockdale with the Sheriff's Department indicated there was about 20 arrests a year for drug overdose, drug-related crimes. He also indicated that they went after this Dr. Jeffrey Gundel, who sold over 60,000 oxydone pills. Okay. Where do those pills end up? These are some of the doctors that we're thinking about bringing actions against also. We haven't really decided about going after the individual doctors at this particular time, and the reason why is that we think if we go against the distributors and the manufacturers, that's enough litigation for any one lawsuit. In 2007, executives of Purdue Pharma paid $634 million for criminal charges that were brought against them because of their misleading not only the doctors and the patients about the risk of addiction. And despite the guilty plea, which included an agreement to cease misleading marketing and promoting, they continue to do the same. And that's part of our lawsuit against Purdue. I was asked a question about comparing this to big tobacco, and that's exactly what's going to be happening here. I have a DVD. I don't know if I can use it, but is there a way to play a DVD in this room or not? Yeah. Okay. I see it already. My question was going to say, if everything's not out, if they sit in Marshall, we'll be deciding if I have to go with one of the other.
While that's getting set up and to save time, I just want to weigh in as someone who has both served as a county legislator and as a judge. You have to make the decision as to whether you want to engage in this lawsuit. My respectful suggestion is that you should, and that it's sound public policy to do it. As a judge, I presided over a major asbestos litigation that involved 10,000 plus people and several billions of dollars. And the dispute was in part over who would pay on the part of insurance companies and how the claims would be determined. I think it's very important, as you vet law firms, that you make sure that the law firm that represents you has commonality with your interests and not statewide interests or national interests. Quite frankly, how formulas are established for the purpose of determining reimbursement, and I lived through this as a county legislator in the tobacco lawsuits. How formulas are determined is very specific in terms of the negotiation with the court and the judges presiding in the case. And so I think sometimes law firms represent larger counties and larger communities who may not have the same formula interest as the smaller communities in upstate New York, such as we're representing. So we think we're better positioned to represent the interest of a profile like this county, Central New York, and the Mohawk Valley. We think we have both the experience and the community of interest that is much more consistent with your situation than those who would claim to be a part of a national consortium. At the end of the day, I want to tell you this. Lawyers are lawyers. And whether one has done national torts or state torts, we have done both. John Sharundalo and I have presided as judges over also cases of this type. We understand how the pie gets divided. And these cases are either going to get settled or tried, and if they're going to get settled, it is very important for you to make sure that you have representation that is going to look out for your interests versus some of the larger counties. That's all I have to say.
Supervisor Brady, you have a question?
Yeah, that was excellent, because one of my questions was going to be, how can, if all things are fairly equal, how can we determine your firm's better than the last presentation we had? And I think you answered it fairly well with my question before I even asked, that you're saying that we in Warren County, although a smaller county,
Yes.
we will get, and correct me if I'm wrong, we'll get more, we'll get a better variable for the total pie when it is handed out than maybe another law firm that would say, I'm going to lean a little more towards the larger counties, because, you know, and so forth. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly what I'm saying, and I'm giving you my experience as a majority leader of a county legislature for 21 years, believe it or not, as well as, well, long story, as well as a presiding judge. And we're not looking to represent the large downstate counties. We're here making the argument that there's a community of interest upstate, and that we have the tools to do this, and that frankly our experience in local government, as well as our experience as judges and as trial lawyers, gives us a unique perspective for the upstate counties, and so that's why we're here, and that's why we think we're right for you. Thank you.
Yeah, somebody asked me earlier, I think it was the chairman, about tobacco litigation and this type of litigation. And basically, the big tobacco and the opioid manufacturers both engaged in deceptive marketing. And if you recall, years ago, they would say more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarettes. So what happens is that if you go to number 3 on the video, OxyContin started marketing it by having this doctor, number 3, if you can play that. Basically, what he's saying here is that he's promoting OxyContin for long-term use. Okay, contrary to the thought previous to this marketing campaign, opioids were only supposed to be used on a short-term basis and just for palliative care. But he's one of the doctors that they bought and purchased to come on and to give this whole thing, the marketing then succeeded after that. I don't know if you get the hearing on the other ones. I don't think it's the CP.
Is that another one, Louis? Is
I
that
have another one, if we can just put that in there, we'll see if that's it.
I don't think we're going to get volume, Louis, unfortunately. Out of the other 3 clips, was there any other, I mean...
The one I wanted to show you is, if you can go back maybe to the second one. These were some of the people that were given OxyContin 15 years later. They were the poster children for this marketing campaign that they started. I don't know. In any event,
They're on their way.
So these people were given the drug...
They were given OxyContin in the beginning, and they were saying what a wonderful drug it is, and it's helped them with their pain. 15 years later, 3 of them were dead because of overdoses. One was involved in a motor vehicle accident, fell asleep at the wheel, and was killed. So this is just some of the video that I wanted to show about the deceptive practices that were being utilized by these different drug companies.
Louis, can I ask you why... I mean, we're getting presentations from 2 firms today, and we had one last month, but why are you all not joining forces for the better of...
I think what's going to happen at some point in time, all the litigation so far that's been sued in New York State has been transferred down to Suffolk County. There's like 8 or 9 cases in what they call multi-district litigation, and Suffolk County has somehow or another taken these cases and decided that they were going to be tried down there. I'm not so sure at this particular time. Our thought is to bring these cases in federal court. There's going to be a multi-district litigation that's going to be scheduled in federal court. I think the meeting is later on this month. Many of these law firms that I talked about who are at the Mass Tort Conference are going to be participating in that. At some point, to answer your question, at some point, we should all work together and to go after the pharmaceutical companies so we can get the best results for our clients. And I think that will happen. I think what's going to happen, we're not going to join firms because each firm has their own individual clients. As Bob indicated to you, we're worried about Warren County, Oneida County, counties that we represent, to get them the most in damages that we can get for them because of this false and misleading advertising.
So here's the deal. If the case goes to settlement, and this is what I did as a judge in the asbestos case, you organize a settlement committee, and who is on that committee is important. Moreover, the judge looks for communities of interest within the litigation. And we're not convinced that there is precisely a community of interest between Nassau and Suffolk County in Warren County, because the weighting of the expense that Lou showed you may be very, very different. So is the reimbursement greater for police expenditures than it is for certain aspects of social services expenditures? And the demographics of rural and upstate counties weigh differently, we think, from downstate counties. So the question of why aren't we all joining together, I think, in part has to do with where you come from and what your perception is as to the interest of your client. I'm not sure that I'm saying that totally clearly, so if you have a follow-up.
No, that's...
Okay.
That's, yeah.
So basically, the federal judge in the tobacco cases indicated that the defendants have falsely denied, distorted, and minimized the significant adverse health consequences of smoking for decades. This applies also to the pharmaceutical companies because they did the same thing, saying that it's okay to take these drugs on a long-term basis. And the only thing that happens when you take these drugs, they're part of the opium plant. The thing that happens when you take these drugs is you become addicted. And that's exactly what's happened throughout the entire country. Okay. Warren County alone is not going to be able to bring the pharmaceutical companies to the bargaining table. And that was part of the meeting I had in Las Vegas with these other attorneys. It's over 3,000 counties in the United States. 3,000 counties and 3,000 lawsuits against these pharmaceutical companies, and if you can add in cities on top of that, villages and towns, are going to bring the pharmaceutical companies to the table because of their stock price. Once you start mass litigation against these companies, their stockholders are going to say, oh, what's happening here? I'll give you an example. As of October 13, 2017, Johnson & Johnson stock was selling at $136.43 per share with a market cap of $336.18 billion. Just assume that it drops $6.43 per share. If it drops $6.43 a share, they lose over $16 billion in market cap. A $12.83 drop would reduce the company's market cap by $32 billion. A $25 stock price would reduce the market cap to $64 billion. These CEOs care less about mass tort litigation and their conduct. Most times they are not taken off the board. But if the stock starts fluctuating, like in the Volkswagen cases, they get rid of the CEOs of these companies. So they have to come to the table at some point in time to try to get these cases settled. There are just too many lawsuits that are going to start all over the country. 10 states already have started litigation against the same defendants. Yesterday, New Jersey and Alaska joined the group of states that have sued these pharmaceutical companies. With the 41 attorney generals going after them for their books and records, actions being started by all the various states, actions being started by all the various counties throughout the United States, at some point in time, this is what's going to settle the case, the stock market. They're going to determine that it's too expensive and too risky to try these cases. And it's going to be like the tobacco litigation from years ago where they settled for something like $300 billion. That's what we expect to happen in this litigation. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer your questions along with that.
Does the committee have any questions? Supervisor Beatty?
Yeah, so how many smaller communities did you say you're representing currently?
Right now, we have commitments from the village of Herkimer, the mayor, I met with him last week, the village of Frankfurt, other villages within the Herkimer County. We'll be representing the city of Utica. We'll be representing the city of Syracuse. We have multiple small townships in Pennsylvania that we will be representing also. And it's all with the same thought in mind, to get these cases filed, so at some point in time, the market is going to drive the settlement. That's what's going to happen.
We also have 2 central New York counties, but it hasn't been announced yet. So
Okay.
we don't want to-
And so you guys consider yourselves specializing in the smaller counties? Would that be a correct assumption?
That's our emphasis, that's correct.
Yeah, we want the smaller counties and the cities. That's what we're looking for.
Okay. Sorry about the clip. I don't know what happened
I
here,
don't
but
know.
excellent presentation though, and
Thank you.
a lot of good numbers and specifics on your boards there.
Thank you.
We probably won't render a decision today, but it's something for us to think about after we hear the next presenter, and maybe for next Finance Committee meeting, maybe we'll have an answer.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Good
much.
luck to you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Good luck to your daughter.
Yep.
Bob Stephenson.
Hi. Thank you, Lou. Bob, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good luck.
Sorry. Cap was on.
I've been wearing it.
You would be.
Coming.
They pay the settlement. We get a little bit of money. This is cigarette pays out. Cigarettes still on the market.
Yep.
In this case, it's our insurance rates. These pharmaceutical companies are gonna just raise the prices even higher. I mean, not that Horry County can stop this process, but aren't we just signing on for nothing but a shift in money?
Well, the thing is,
Ultimately, it's coming out of our pocket. We're gonna pay for it.
we sign on with it. We're not signing on for nothing, are we?
You know?
I mean,
Well, we might get something, whatever the...
That's
but
what
we
I
don't,
have to be able to do,
okay,
because
so
the
what we're
only
saying,
thing
we
I
don't have to
could
pay them
figure out
anything
something
up
like
front.
that.
Whatever we
Anything
get
else
is...
would be-
25% of the settlement.
Okay.
They get 25% of the settlement, we get the 75%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
All
appreciate
we're
it.
doing is just, it's a mothership.
But that's, unfortunately, that's how the world
How do
works.
we have to do it though?
I'm not happy with that either, that's how the world works, right? They,
And this probably gonna be
company
represented
gets,
on the other
then
side.
gets caught with their hand in the kicking, so I'm just passing it along to the customers ultimately.
But
The
I'm,
other side. She
I'm
represents.
ultimately interested in stopping what it's doing to the people.
Right.
Well, I think you're
One
seeing
of
some
your
of the
bad
federal
guys.
legislation now.
Wherever you would like to stand or sit, it's up to you. We do have our next presenters here from Napoli and Skolnick, please. Okay.
Everyone has difficulty with that.
Oh, we're having people.
Yeah, well,
Nice to meet you.
Paul
Napoli.
We've
met
outside
Yeah. Hi.
Doug Beatty, pleasure meeting you.
Hi, how are you?
Doug Beatty.
Rena. Oh, we said.
Oh, hey, I think I made you,
Hi.
Doug Beatty.
Good.
Where we met? Yeah, you look familiar.
I don't know, it must have been one of those cocktail parties.
Let's hear more about that. I don't know.
I studied at the bar,
The election season.
Thank you. Are we supposed to share? Is that the idea?
We Sharon?
Must be.
Making my way
Feel
around.
free.
I shook hands, so...
Oh, whenever you're ready, or whoever, you guys have the floor, so it's...
Hey, you know what, Doug,
We're
I'll take
very
one.
high-tech, we're gonna do a hologram that's gonna be on the table.
Nice.
Actually, we're very high-tech, low-tech. We put together a little bit of a package that has a lot of information. We've probably spoken to about
Okay.
200 counties and cities around the country, and as everybody's been asking us questions, we listened and tried to put some of the answers into these materials. So we've included them, and later when you're in bed and you want something to read to put you to sleep, this might answer some of those questions. So. You can send more packages up. I wasn't sure about the number of people that would be here, but you want to begin?
Sure. You must be getting sick of listening to attorneys. And I didn't know how much time we had, so I actually reduced
my introductory comments in writing as part of your record, so I'll try to shorten it up as we go through it. So I think the first thing I'd like to talk to you about after thanking you for having us is why I'm here. I'm Bill Nickus from Hudson Falls, Washington County, and when I asked to present to you, it was not because I have a financial stake in this or in the action that I'm going to ask you to take, but I'm here because of my own mission, which I think is perhaps the same as yours, and that's to do whatever I can, whatever contribution I can make to address a nationwide epidemic, opioid addiction. And my experience in getting to that point perhaps is the same as yours, but I have several friends, several people, good people, who became addicts. And I learned firsthand just how devastating opioid addiction can be. And I learned from a good friend of mine who's a recovering alcoholic that when he attends our local AA meetings, the majority of the attendees at our AA meetings now are not addicted to alcohol. The majority are addicted to opioids, including heroin. And as I further looked into it, my own son, Alex, disclosed and revealed to me just how this epidemic is thriving in our own community. Alex is a paramedic, and he's a paid fireman in the city of Glens Falls. And shockingly, he wears his paramedic hat more than he does his fireman's helmet. And his number one tool in his job is not a fire hose. It's an applicator full of Narcan. And it's not unique to Warren County or Washington County. This is something that's going on across the country. So, based on my personal relationship with these people and my mission, I started to look at what can we do about it? And my friend said, well, don't we have a federal agency, the Drug Administration, Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA as we call it, that's charged with the responsibility of supervising the illegal dumping of opioids into our communities. And he pointed out a situation that occurred in West Virginia, a small town of 5,000 residents. The DEA, with its group of talented lawyers and investigators and their database, uncovered the illegal enterprise where over 1 million doses of OxyContin per year was getting dumped into this community of 5,000 people. And you don't have to guess how much percentage of those people became addicted. However, if any of you saw the 60 Minutes show several Sundays ago, you would have learned that what was a responsible and effective DEA enforcement protocol is no longer in existence. And the larger handout that I passed out to you is a Washington Post article that details what that's all about. But 60 Minutes presented a DEA whistleblower. And that whistleblower disclosed publicly what has happened to DEA, where their enforcement powers have now been emasculated. And how did that happen? The first thing that happened was that the pharmaceutical industries offered huge salaries to the most talented attorneys at DEA, the investigators, hired them away to protect the interests of the pharmaceutical industry. But that wasn't the worst of it, because at the same time, they funneled millions of dollars into campaign coffers on the federal level and wrote legislation that further handcuffed the DEA. And 100% of the senators and the members of the House of Representatives, every single one of them, voted to pass that legislation. And the result was that what used to be an effective DEA enforcement was
dropped by 90%. Their actions dropped literally over 90%. So we don't have a federal government that's effective. So the only other avenue that I'm aware of that could work to address this problem is the judicial system. Now, judges have different legal philosophies that may or may not coincide with what the legal theory is in the opioid litigation that you're hearing about. But at least they're insulated from the cash that lobbyists for the pharmaceuticals dumped into our government. So when I studied the options in the legal fields, I learned from the National Trial Lawyers Association that several prominent law firms in the country were brainstorming ideas, legal theories, to enlist the courts to address the problem. And I learned that there was a seminar just this last September in Washington, D.C., where our National Trial Lawyers Association asked several of those prominent lawyers to present to the National Trial Bar, to educate the National Trial Bar what could be done about opioid litigation, the theories behind it, the pleadings that could be used, the tactics that could be used to avoid a dismissal, because this is new stuff. And when I looked at the sheet on the seminar, I see the firm of Paul Napoli from New York City. So my next question is, who is Paul Napoli from New York City? Well, I happen to have another son who has become a lawyer. He works in a large New York City law firm, and he happens to practice in the same environment as the Paul Napoli firm. So I asked my son Luke, what's the Paul Napoli firm in New York City? And he said, well, Dad, you remember the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center? I said, of course. He says, well, the aftermath of that attack, thousands of workers were employed to clean up the debris. And in the process of that, they ingested the toxic fumes and the toxic dust that was on the ground at ground zero. And they developed these debilitating medical conditions. So a class action was brought to represent those victims and to recover some compensation for those victims and their families. The federal court that was assigned to oversee that class action selected two firms to be co-counsel to oversee the entire litigation. One of those two was the Paul Napoli firm. And Paul collected millions of dollars on behalf of those victims and their families in that litigation, and is well recognized in New York for his efforts in that regard. Then I did some research on Paul himself. He doesn't like to blow his own horn, I know that. I'm privileged to do that today. And in one of your handouts, I've given you his resume, which details his background, his education, his litigation accomplishments. And on the front sheet of that, which I've highlighted in yellow, a couple of passages, we learned that in September of this year, just a little over a month ago, the lawsuit that is now assigned to a New York State Supreme Court judge out of Suffolk County to oversee the entire litigation has two co-lead counsel to supervise this very litigation that we're talking about today. And one of those two firms is the Paul Napoli law firm of New York City. So from what I learned, there's no other choice. However, there are other firms out there that are competent. They know what they're doing. They're considering them. I'm here today not to tell you to hire any particular firm. All I'm asking you to do as a member of our community that I see affected by this epidemic is to take some action, to take some position to address the problem. Because we may not even see a dime of money from this litigation, but already we're learning that the message is getting through to the industry. Things are already changing. And the more counties the more states that participate, the more effective, the more influential we'll be to change what has been happening over the last decade and hopefully save further victims from this scourge. So I thank you for letting me share my personal mission with you. I hope that mission is yours. And it's my privilege to introduce you to Paul Napoli, for whom I have the greatest of respect.
Thank you very much, Bill. That was actually very unexpected. And so I might trample on some of the ground that Bill talked about a little bit, but I'm going to really try to talk to you about three things. One, who we are, the Napoli Skolnick firm. Two, our strategy. And three, what is the difference between us and the other firms you might have met with? So, and I think those are three important questions that you probably have in your mind. So I began practicing in 1992. I am second generation attorney. My wife is an attorney. She is second generation, the youngest of 8. Nice big Irish Catholic family. Her brother was also my partner. He was an attorney, and he's retired several years ago from practicing law. Marie graduated, got her master's in law at NYU, but we graduated together at St. John's where we met. We didn't actually start dating until after law school, but that's another story for another day. We have about 60 lawyers in our office. We're in 11 states. We're primarily headquartered in Suffolk County, New York now, and I'll tell you a little bit why later, but we also have office in New York City, LA, Illinois, Miami, and Delaware. And it's important to be around the country, but we are through and through New York. I went to Fordham undergrad, St. John's Law School. When I began my practice, my father was a trial lawyer. I started primarily doing automobile cases and soon came upon a pharmaceutical case called diet drugs. And I was one of very few lawyers at the time that started taking on diet drug cases. And when I was 29, I settled my 5,000 diet drug cases in Philadelphia and New York. I was lead in New York for $1.5 billion. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things, not to be a braggart, but just to sort of tell you why this experience is important. Because this type of case we're dealing with now is, when you boil it down, a pharmaceutical case. Opioid pills, what did the companies do? Why did they do it? And that's the same questions that are asked in every pharmaceutical case. So from diet drugs in 1999 till today, our firm has been in pretty much every major pharmaceutical litigation throughout the country, and that's why we have offices around the country. And our partners, we have 10 partners, 4 are women, and of those partners, we're probably 65% of our practice, if not more, is pharmaceutical litigation. We know who to depose, where the bodies are buried, where they hide the documents. We have the science experts that understand what drives the force, and we understand that in this type of case, it's not always the science that's involved, it's the marketing. And when you deal with a case like this, what happens in all pharmaceutical cases, the same MO, time and time again. The science develops the drug, and at some point they have a small pool of users, and they want to expand that pool. So the science department starts shifting the burden to the marketing department to increase the number of users. And that's exactly what happened here. They went from taking people who the science said it's only for cancer, it's addictive, it's for post-surgery, to having the marketing drive the science that it's not addictive, you can use it for chronic pain, and that's where all the bodies are buried, not in the science department, in the marketing department, and we understand that. So we've been appointed and currently probably in 30 multi-district litigations, which are federal coordinated state jurisdictions, either as the lead attorney or one of those on the executive committee. And that's important because in order to get in those positions, you need to be vetted by federal and a state judge. They need to say, the federal judge, if you're on an MDL, you have to prove that you're qualified, that you have the money and the resources behind you to carry through what you say you're going to do, and the expertise to do it. And so time and time again, we are appointed to do that. Not only do the judges appoint us, but our peers ask us to be involved. And they ask us to be involved because they know we can get the work done. You know, when you're suing 25 pharmaceutical companies, the big firms like Luke, Mr. Nickus' Bill's son, comes in, and they have 1,000 lawyers. Each of them are going to have 1,000 lawyers. We already know who they are. And they have 10, 15 million pages of document each, just in their new drug applications, or in their abbreviated drug applications, or in their adverse event reports. So there's a huge volume of documents. And if you're a little firm here or in any location, they just dump it right on you. We've invested in the infrastructure, the technology, in the computer systems, millions of dollars in the software, the ESI software. We have experts in our office in ESI, which is now the new discovery tool, to weed through those documents, to understand what they are, and to cull them out quickly, because you're going to be looking at 240 million pages of documents. So that experience is important. You know, we didn't start just representing municipalities. We did it in 2000. We made a lot of money, and that's why Marie's brother retired. And I was 29, and Marie was 30 years old, and we said, we enjoy practicing law. We're going to continue to practice law. And we started doing environmental cases, MTBE. And we were appointed here in New York in MTBE and represented a lot of water districts, not only in this state, but around the country. Represented pretty much every Long Island water district that had MTBE issues. And we reduced our fee then, not because we were trying to be competitive, but we reduced it because we're part of the community. And we feel, as New Yorkers, we're part of the community. I spent my growing up coming here, going to Wyndham and Hunter, learning how to ski. We bring our family up here to ski and to enjoy upstate New York. You know, we are New Yorkers through and through. So we reduced our fee to 25% then. I was approached in 2004 by two detectives who were down at Ground Zero who had contracted cancer, and they came to my door and they said, "We've gone to 50 lawyers and nobody will take our case." And oddly enough, I said, I couldn't turn them away. I said, I'm going to do as much research as I could. And I came upon a book by Sam Quinones called Into the Dust. It was a 120-page book. I read the book and I said, oh my gosh, what they were telling everybody down there wasn't exactly what they said it was. And now, fast forward, Sam Quinones wrote a book, I just learned about this a few months ago, called Dreamland, which is about the opioid crisis, The Reporter. And I'm now going to follow him on iBooks or something, because it seems some of my cases are followed. But I took on those two detectives, and we ended up immediately getting endorsed by the PBA, because they didn't know what to do with their members who were injured. The firefighters had another law firm, but 90% of the firefighters actually came to our firm, because that other firm and the people had also told me air was fine. So they were concerned, they wanted to try somewhere different. We ended up representing all the trades, construction workers, the New York police, the detectives, the state police, people from around the country and far. We represented 98% of the people. With all the lawyers in New York City, nobody would do it. This other firm had a few firefighters because they were the union firefighters. We carried the water. They came in with 20 million pages of documents. We culled through the documents, and it's a different case, obviously, but the amount of work involved, we did 6,000 depositions. We did everything. We dealt with, as lead, we dealt with negotiating the $900 million settlement with the city and the federal government. And what's important about this case is because we see this case as not only fighting in the courthouse around the corner here, but also fighting in Washington and fighting in the state legislature. In 9/11, we got a bill passed called Jimmy Nolan's Law. Jimmy Nolan was my client, who didn't realize his injuries and his cancer was the result of 9/11 and was out of work, and he was out on the statute of limitations. We got a bill passed, signed by Governor Patterson, that allowed him to proceed. And we just defended 2 weeks ago, and actually we had Luke Nickus defended in the New York Court of Appeals. He did the argument, we did all the briefing, the constitutionality of that statute with the AG. So we understand the law and not only the trial, from the Supreme Court, all the way up to the Court of Appeals. This spring, we were in the U.S. Supreme Court on a pharmaceutical issue. We were the first case argued in front of Neil Gorsuch in the U.S. Supreme Court. So you've got to always be prepared. My father would say growing up, make money, not law. But you have to be prepared in case the other side is trying to push law. And so we have been to the highest court in the country, the highest court in the state. So we have that experience. Yesterday we were lobbying Washington because we represent children at Flint, but we're also talking about opioids. And in 9/11 we got our clients and helped write the bill to reopen the Victims' Compensation Fund, which got our clients another $3 billion. So we did not charge any of our clients for that. It's just we understand that sometimes you have to think out of the box. You have to be prepared. We see bills coming down. President Trump last week talked about it being a national crisis. He didn't declare it a national emergency, but a health emergency. There were bills and things that were passed yesterday. In Ohio last week, Attorney General DeWine came out with something. So you have to be able to understand the lobbying as well as the courts. The other things about our qualifications, we've been endorsed by NYSAC. Mary Odell, Commissioner Mary Odell is president of. Steve Aquera, we partner with them. NACO, Roy Brooks, who's the president of NACO, National Association of Counties, has endorsed us. NABCO, National Association of Black Counties, has endorsed us. And then we were appointed the co-lead here in New York. And in New York, our office is in Suffolk County. I grew up trying cases in Suffolk County and Nassau County. When I look out my window, much like this, I'm only 2 minutes away. There's no airfare or travel expense. It's easy to run to the courthouse. Now, the strategy. So our strategy is there are 4 potential actors in this case. The first are the manufacturers. The second are the distributors. The third are the big box pharmacies. And the fourth are the physicians, the bad actors, and asterisk. We'll talk to you about that. So the manufacturers, the theory against the manufacturers is deceptive marketing. That's right in our wheelhouse, deceptive marketing. And we're bringing claims under public nuisance law and under negligence. But most lawyers don't understand there are limitations in New York under a case called Cox v. Con Ed of what damages you can get as a municipality in New York. None of these other lawyers who came to the room understand that yet. But it's a problem that you have to understand in the beginning. You can't stumble upon it later on. So it's deceptive practices and a public nuisance, and that's the claim against the manufacturers. Second is the distributors. The distributors have obligations under the Federal Controlled Substances Act and under the State Controlled Substances Act. Under both, they have reporting requirements and they have the duty to report suspicious orders. That's too many drugs going to one community like West Virginia. We're talking about, we represent 8 counties in West Virginia, so we've seen it firsthand where there's 300 people in the town and there's millions of pills distributed to the one town. That's a red flag. That's why the distributors were put in place. We know the other defendants, like Insys. We sued John Kapoor in another case, the chairman. You might have seen him the other day. He got arrested for distributing Subsys, which was a fentanyl that you put under the mouth. And they were giving it to people who didn't have cancer and lying to the insurers to pay for it that they had cancer. And paying doctors, taking them to dinner, having be key opinion leaders. We know how that works because it's the same MO. So we know, and we know Kapoor, we know Insys, we know these defendants intimately, and we know the defense attorneys intimately. And all the defense attorneys, no matter where I go in the country, and we represent everywhere from New Mexico to Georgia to in Florida, all over the country, it's always the same New York lawyers. And we know who they are, and so we know how to get to them, is probably a good way of putting it. We know when they work and how they work. So the distributors are responsible under the Controlled Substances Act. The third is the big box pharmacies. They also have obligations under the Controlled Substances Act that they can have to know where the drugs are going. When I did fen-phen or diet drugs back in 1999, I was able to get American Home Products database that showed where their drugs went. Just as much as the distributors are responsible to know and the pharmacies know, the big drug companies know too. In 1999, I could open up their spreadsheets in their database and I could say it went to Dr. Jones, it went to CVS, and how many pills. And they did it back then because they wanted to market to the doctors. They would actually go to the doctor's office, hey, you're the best pill pusher we have, we're going to buy you dinner, we're going to send you to Tahiti, whatever it was. So if they could do that in 1999, they're that much better at doing it now. And there are federal databases called ARCOS, and there are state databases, too, that they're responsible to report. And so we take a civil criminal approach. We like to have the county attorney on the pleadings with us, because we know when we walk into the courthouse and it comes to trial, they're going to be at our side, and the judge is going to know and respect them and give them the power and the understanding of the gravity of what's going on. That assists. We do whatever we can to leverage ourselves to get the best result for the county. That is what's important to us. And we bring in local people too that are familiar with the area to help us. You know, we understand, even though we're New Yorkers, we're from New York City. So sometimes it's seen a little bit differently. So if we're in West Virginia, we have local counsel in West Virginia, or in Georgia, we have local counsel in Georgia, and we have the county's attorneys on board. So that's our qualifications and our strategy. The third is the individual doctors, and I say an asterisk. There's doctors that were these key opinion leaders that the drug companies started, and we're on camera, right? Are we on camera or not on camera?
Oh, yeah.
So I'll hold my tongue a little. So there's some doctors who, from the very beginning, they paid them to ghostwrite articles or used them to sign their name to ghostwritten articles, and we know who they are. We sue them. One of them is right downtown Manhattan, New York. We work trying to get agreements with them because we know they don't really have a lot of money, so we want them to be part of it. And not so much as in New York, but in some other states, we will sometimes sue the bad doctors to keep the case in state court. We will be able to keep the case in state court. Some of the defendants have their corporate home here in New York, so it's easy. So what we do is we will file the case here. We put together the master pleading, which is about 250 pages long. We file what's called the short form complaint, and the case gets transferred to Suffolk County as a coordinated case. And we will manage the case, do all the discovery, everything on the case, to the extent we need information from the county on the economic loss, and you need help with that. We will bring in an accounting firm to assist, so we're not draining any resources of the county, because we've been to plenty of counties, they're like, we got plenty of work to do, we don't need any more work. So we recognize that, and we'll work with the county to do that. So the last thing, the difference between us, the fees. We always were at 25%, and our first fee with Nassau County is where our house is now on Long Island. The county executive asked us, well, what if they settle right away? What if it doesn't go, all the way to trial? So we understand that we will accommodate that request, and we graduated a sliding scale starting at 7.5% to 25% to accommodate the Nassau County's request. And we've copied that same complaint. We originally only did 25% for municipalities, reducing our fee. We've copied that same complaint and given it to Warren County here and done it to every county in the state. Some of our competitors were at 40% or 33%, and they've now reduced it to 25%. This is a sliding scale up to 25% if it gets that far. And if it gets that far, they've now, I'm happy to see they've reduced their rate. We did it because we're part of the community, not because we were trying to be competitive, and we did it at the request of Nassau County where we live.
I think he meant to say retainer, not complaint.
Yes, contingency, sorry, I'm sorry. So the second thing, our home office is in Suffolk. And third is most firms only sued the manufacturers. Some firms are only suing the distributors. No firms are suing the big box pharmacies, at least in New York that we've seen. We're the only, and we're the only firm that sued both the manufacturers, the distributors, and the big box pharmacies, and the key opinion leaders in New York. And that's important because as a trial lawyer and as a lawyer, one of the things you'll learn is you can indict a ham sandwich, but also you don't want to have an empty chair in the room. And it's too easy for the defendants to say, hey, listen, we were fined in 2007, we paid $75 million on a case, it's not our responsibility, it's the distributor's responsibility, and point to them in the missing chair, and then to walk away with the juror saying, well, it was the distributor's responsibility. Well, the fact is it's both of their responsibility and the pharmacy's responsibility, and all three of them should be in the case. Some counties have said, very small, said the big box are our biggest employers in the county, we don't want to sue them, and we haven't. But at least you know going in full well of what your decision is, and you make the decision to decide whether or not to include them. By no means should anybody not sue the distributors, and I pull my hair out trying to understand why nobody would do that. So it's important, and that's an important legal strategy that we need to follow through on.
One thing you didn't mention is how much we got for our clients in the FENFEN.
So you know, this may evolve at some point into a fight between the AG wanting to take all the money for the state to decide how much you get, and to the county deciding how much you want to settle your case for. By bringing suit, you're keeping it in your hands to decide what to do. At the end of the day, you could say, the AG got enough money and we're happy with that. Or you could say, why is the AG taking half of the money that is our damages and we're going to press on? And so when I was 27, 28 in diet drugs, there was a class action in Philadelphia. And the judge in Philadelphia, a federal judge, said, we settled the case, $4.2 billion. Mr. Napoli, why are you telling your clients you're not taking the money? And I came down there, and there was a room of a lot older plaintiff lawyers and defense lawyers and the big, scary judge who tells me, you know, your clients should be happy. And when I looked at the detail of what my clients were getting, half of them were getting zero. The other half that was seriously injured weren't getting really what I thought was fair value, at least for New York. And I said, Judge, no, I'm not going to do it. Well, I got the wrath of the plaintiff lawyers, the defendant lawyers, and the judge. And people thought I was pig-headed, but I carried through. I went to the Third Circuit, and I was on to the U.S. Supreme Court. We never made it there because the defendant settled. My case is $5,000 for $1.5 billion, while the other million people settled for $4.2 billion. So it was a big difference in what my clients had gotten compared to what everybody else got nationally. And so you have to have somebody who is prepared to say no to the AG, have the ability to intervene and resolve the case on behalf of the county. You can't have somebody who's, you know, okay, I'm going to make a I'm just making up numbers, $5 million fee at the end of my life. You know, we've done a lot of other cases in between the FENFEN case and the Ground Zero case. We're happy. This is what happened to me in 2014, and sort of a little bit of how I got involved in opioids, is I came down with leukemia. Ironically, I got leukemia from being down at Ground Zero. Our office was across the street. It was the lawyer representing all these people who had cancer. And after I settled the case, I had leukemia and a bone marrow transplant. September of 2014, my brother John was my donor. And I'm here, and I was given oxycodone. I was given 5 milligrams. I didn't get addicted. I was the right type of person to be on it, but you know, you sit in the bed in isolation and slow kettering, and they're giving you pills, and you see stuff on TV. You say, what are they giving me? And we had friends, our former partner, his son died from a heroin overdose. 80% of people who end up on heroin started out on pills. That's the CDC statistic. That's the path that leads to the heroin. Because I've had sheriffs say, well, we have a heroin problem, we don't have a pill problem. Well, it began with the pills. And I went and identified his son's body in the morgue. And we had a friend, well-to-do family on Long Island, this great kid that went to Bucknell, was a lacrosse player, started out with an injury, ended up dying at 22.
He didn't drink, no drugs, good kid.
He didn't realize what he got himself and started on pills. So I started to do, I said, this seems like we have to do something. And what we did is we did what we would do in a pharmaceutical case. We put an ad up. We spent $10,000, put an ad on TV. If you or a loved one has died, please call Napoli Stone. Well, we had it on for a week. We got 2,000 cases, and we had calls after we stopped it for 6 months. We're like, holy moly. And so we said, okay, well now, let's get these guys. Let's do what we ordinarily do and do well. Let's start finding the people with the best stories, and we would find somebody with this horrific story, a young mother or a young father who died, and we learned a few things that made it impossible to pursue the case. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I don't really use the word impossible too often. Most of these drugs are now generic. Purdue is only 1% of the market. 99% are generic. And if you practice in pharmaceutical law, you know there was a case that came out 5 years ago called Mensing that says there is no liability to generic manufacturers in changing the label, that it's the brand manufacturers. And so if you're taking the generic pills and you die, you can't get at the brand manufacturer because you didn't take the drug. And that's what 99% of the states recognize. One state allows you to, even though you didn't take the drug, to sue the brand manufacturer, and that's California, which New York hasn't decided the issue, but we don't really want them to decide the issue at the moment because the U.S. Supreme Court, we know where it's going to go. So you can't sue for that. The second reason you can't sue is a lot of times the kids are in foster care or with the grandparents, so the historian of where you got the drugs and who got the drugs died. In a lot of states, so you don't know who to sue. So the third reason is, by the time you die, a lot of times you're doing something illegal, fentanyl or heroin. And in a lot of states, it's an intervening act that precludes liability even though it's foreseeable. There's statutes, criminal intervention statutes when you did a crime. So you can't sue the manufacturer. So ironically, the person who really led to your death, you can't go after. So we said, let's go back and do what we ordinarily do. And we saw Hanley had sued in Suffolk County, and I know Steve Malone well, and we said, maybe it's the county. So they ended up getting a couple of counties because they were ahead of us, but we're doing it differently because we sue the distributors, sue the manufacturers. This is our home. And we have the better fee structure. In 9/11, we gave back $85 million of our fees to the first responders. So this comes from our heart. This is sort of who we are in giving back, because when I was in the hospital lying in bed, I would watch these nurses and doctors come in and say, you know, how they feel going home at night. So nobody gives jokes about doctors or nurses. It's always about lawyers. So one lawyer at a time, I'm trying to change that perception. So hopefully I've converted 20 people in the room. That lawyer's pretty good.
There's just two things that you didn't mention about the tobacco and how it should be in their hands.
Yes. No, I think I covered that. That it should be the county's decision.
Yeah, because a lot of the...
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
I have a question and a comment. I'm just kind of interested. First of all, I appreciate your flexibility on a fee. Okay, it's a little bit unusual, I think, in my experience. But at $1.2 or $3 million, and it's just kind of just a side question. Did you get 25% of that, or did you get 5% of it?
Oh, for the $1 billion?
Yeah,
$1.5 billion? Our fee was a third. But those were individuals.
Good.
And we had to give some to referral attorneys, and to partners who retired.
Well,
And
it was a good day for the...
we gave money back, but I will say, I gave money back to my high school. I went to Chaminade High School, the Maris brothers taught me, so give back. We gave some to St. John's, we've given some to Fordham, we've given some to where our children go to school and to our church, and we gave $5 million to the 9/11 Memorial.
Just trying to be a little...
But if-
Okay. It was a good day for the good guys then. Just an observation and maybe a question. I used to have a neighbor that was involved in drug court here in Warren County, so I used to periodically chauffeur him to the facility here, and sat in on a number of drug court sessions with the judge. And as a result, I used to have discussions with some of the good people that were addicted but were participants in the program. And they could identify a couple of who you described as the bad actors in the process here. And they're the bad actors in terms of some positions. They're all over the country, or have been all over the country. There used to be one, on Broad Street, and another one in another location. And these are the guys that just kind of wrote the scripts. Exactly. So it's I think that's changing. I hope it's changing, and it's a tough world,
Yeah, we think it's changing because we're trying. We've already served discovery requests for the ARCOS data and for the information, so that we could give it to the county and give it to the police department, turn it over, and you could see where all the pills are going. But I think the drug companies are recognizing they're responsible for what's going on. We've seen, because we've been suing CVS and Rite Aid and Walgreens in a lot of locations. I mean, the DEA, one of the things that Phil was talking about was the DEA diversion program. They were going out and suing these big box companies in Florida that had a CVS, where people would be driving from Louisiana, Mississippi into Florida, into this one little county where there nobody was, because they knew they could get the scripts filled. And so people were coming in one after another from the same doctor with the same script, or with 10 different doctor scripts at the same time, because they're out of their minds, so they just did it. And so that stopped. We saw CVS about 2 weeks ago reduce the number of pills days that they'll allow to be filled to 7 days. We hope that we're having some effect by suing them. I think, the dollar is what drove them. So I think the dollar is what's going to drive them to stop, too.
Yeah, I apologize, I have to go, but I did have a couple quick questions. First of all, obviously you're very professional, and your resume is very impressive, to say the least. My concern or question is, obviously you're the lead attorney down in Suffolk County. We're just a small little county up here in the north, and sometimes being bigger is better. I know that from my own personal experience, and sometimes being smaller, a smaller firm, is better too, because they're hungrier, okay? And they want to take care of the needs of a smaller county. So I guess what I'm asking you is, are you representing other smaller counties?
Yeah.
If so, what are they? And if not, why not? And what assurance can I have that we're going to get our fair share of the pie, just like Nassau County or some of the other big guys, which obviously are bigger.
So we're representing about 20 counties so far. Up here we have Clinton, Essex, Saratoga, and in talks with several others, which we think will be signed. And we've done these same presentations and had competition. 6 months ago it was one other person. Now we're going around the country and there's like 12 other people, but we continue to win because we have what a little firm doesn't have. We have that resource. You're going to get 240 million pages of documents on a low estimate from 24 manufacturers. You're going to have the ARCOS database, which is like reading Braille, so you need to have computer people. We have about 10 programmers in-house, and they just do this ESI discovery. A small firm will have to go to a vendor. Even a lot of the big firms go to vendors, and they get a half a cent a page or a quarter a page, which is tens of millions of dollars in doing it. We chose to do it all in-house. We bought the same programs these other vendors have, and we do it ourselves. When I walked in to my first 9/11 deposition, the defendants was a big firm. It was like 3,000 lawyers, and they thought they were being wise guys. They sent me 10 million pages of documents 2 days before the deposition. And so we walked into the deposition. They figured, how are they going to have a look at these pages? And it was a significant person we were deposing. He ran the site. And we walked in. I started handing the guy documents, great documents showing, what they knew and when they knew it. And the defense attorney said, stop. Where are you getting these documents from? I said, look at the bottom at your Bates number. I got them from you. He said, you looked at them in 2 days? Yes. And that was, that was 2005, 2006. We're that much better now. So that's a difference. We're going to, as the lead, we're going to be the ones talking to the defendant. They email me, call me in the morning. We're the ones talking to them on a day-to-day. We have control of what we request. We have control. We're going to eventually have control of the negotiations and what happens and on important issues. A little guy is not going to know about Cox v. Con Ed and how to get around it. We have big firm attorney experience in our office, guys that Cornell and UPenn and smarter than I am, that know those nuanced issues, that clerk for judges in the highest courts, that can get those issues. I know what my limitations are. So they write those briefs and set it up for us.
I'd just like to add to that, your damages are based on your injuries. This isn't a mass tort.
Right.
It's individual cases.
Right.
So your settlement or your recovery will be based on what your damages are, not everybody else.
This committee would say to me, if I come in and say, I got you $10, you could say, Mr. Napoli, go to hell and go back there. If I got you 10 million, you could say, Mr. Napoli, go to hell and go back there. I pride myself on getting 3 times, 4 times of what the value of the case is. In 9/11, I got 100% when I settled their case for $900 million. I got triple that when I got them $3 billion from the Victims' Compensation Fund that's been paid out. We got a bill passed in Washington in September that they vetoed Obama on, but it passed, called JASTA, where you can sue the state sponsors of terrorism, and I sued the Saudis for a 3rd time. So now I'm going for the 3rd time for the 9/11 responders. So my concern, if there's a problem with value, I will tell you it and why, and you'll make that decision. It will not be my decision. And I filed the case here because once all the discovery is coordinated and done down there, it's going to come back here for trial if need be. And that's the fear that we're putting in them because it's our judge, our juror.
Right, gotcha. I apologize for having to leave.
No, thank you.
You guys are very impressive. Thank you very much.
Nice meeting you.
Supervisor Stratton?
Yeah, well, the short answer, because I don't think we're going to have a committee here in a minute. I've got to go too.
Okay.
But along with Supervisor Doug, one of the other presentations said that, Warren County, the little municipalities will sometimes get lost in the mix, and that their effort and their abilities and their skill sets are to better represent the smaller municipalities, the smaller communities, and that they can better position us and not get lost in the mix of the bigger communities.
So I'll tell you 2 things about that. First of all, one is there's an economies of scale. If you got one firm representing one person, those tens of millions of dollars spent around the country to advance the case are going to be borne by the county itself. Where I represent 70 counties, I'll probably end up representing 500 counties and cities around the country. The 10 million, 20 million, 30 million that needs to be spent on this will be divided among them, so it'll be 100,000 persons. You're not going to have that economies of scale.
And that comes off the end once we have a recovery. If there's no recovery, there's no cost to you, just
So that's an issue. And my tentacles are all over the country. I have a partner who does pharmaceutical in California, in Illinois, in Miami, and Delaware. We're in all the spots and in all the cases. There's going to be a federal MDL. I know all the players because, quite frankly, I grew up with all the players. My father had worked with the players. I've been litigating with the players. There is, just like this is a small community, the legal community in this area is not big. When there's backroom talk and discussion of what's going on. We're in the mix all the time. When we had the AAJ conference in September, we spoke there because we're one of the top firms leading the charge. When other people, and that's why it's sort of blown out a little bit, because other people follow what we're doing nationally around the country, and we get copycat. I mean, if you look at our complaint and you compare it to others' complaints, I mean, there's no doubt we have people just who know this material and know it well. And there's no small firm that's really going to be able to figure that out.
Right.
You're talking hundreds of depositions of science people in pharmacology, in addictiveness, in dosages, in doctors, in marketing. Those experts don't come around too often. Ran Azizi, who was on 60 Minutes in DA, is our expert. We have other DEA experts out of Ohio and out of Pittsburgh. They just don't, we have exclusivity with these experts because we don't want them to get trampled on by some small firm that doesn't know what they're doing, that preps them to say the wrong thing. They don't have that understanding or reach to find those doctors. There's maybe 5, I count on one hand, doctors that will that were in the FDA that will now testify against pharmaceutical companies that have any credibility. What they usually do is they go to the pharmaceutical side and testify against us. It's very rare. It's like we call it a unicorn. And so these guys are not going to be able to find those people. There's no doubt about it. They have to partner with someone like us.
Also, that's what we've always done, is represent the little guy. When you talk about the FenFen cases, we went to see what our clients were getting, each individual of our clients. And really, you ultimately have the ultimate decision whether to accept the numbers or not.
So sometimes I get controversy, and I get controversy because when the defendant says, I want to settle, and the judge says, I want you to settle for this number, and we say, no, it's not the right number, people don't always want to hear that. We're prepared to walk in and take the brunt of it. Born in Queens, grew up in Nassau, live in Nassau and Suffolk. I mean, it's okay. We're gonna represent you.
Yes, I
and you alone. You're not going to know about anybody else unless you want to know about anybody else.
Grew up in Brooklyn, so I'm going to ask you the money questions, okay? The expenses.
Yes, we front all the expenses. On 9/11, it's widely reported. In case costs, we spent $40 million, and I can tell you we spent over $90 million of our own money in prosecuting the cases before we got any recovery.
So you front and then take back at the end?
At the end, yes. And the difference in ours and some of the other firms is ours is net. We take it off the top. It's a big difference. Some of the other firms, if you look closely at their retainers, they take it off the gross, so they'll take their 25%, not a sliding scale or whatever higher number they have, and they'll take out of that 75% the costs. So that can eat up another large portion. So in this way, we're sharing with you by doing it net. We're sharing at the end of the day. We're still eating a piece of it.
And you want a firm that can afford the cost of this litigation.
And Maria's been quiet, but I can tell you.
I personally thought that was an excellent presentation. It was heartfelt at points, and I love the fact that you guys have tentacles. One thing you did mention was the bad guys, and I'm wondering why I have Bill here, but no, actually,
he's the hungry one.
Yeah.
Well, I work with his son on a few cases. When I had a few years ago when I got sick, interestingly enough, my partner decided that it was going to be the end of our partnership as I was on my deathbed, and Luke, Bill's son, represented me. And his son, Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law, smart as can be, greatest respect, and I think he has respect for me, and we've been doing some things together, and he was the one who made the introduction. So there is a connection. He's not only a lawyer that I've worked with, but a good friend. I would consider him one of my best friends now, frankly, and we spend time together in the summers with our families, and you're just the new granddad.
Yeah. Luke takes after his mother, and I don't know if it's respectful, but he calls you a junkyard dog.
Now, as Mr. Nickus picked you and did all his research, I'm sure you did the same for him. So You also have a leg up because my daughter is attending St. John's right now, so.
Oh, is she?
Okay. I was on the Board of Governors up until last year. I was,
Yeah.
I was 10
Should
years.
have done all this first.
What
So-
year is she in?
She's in her 4th year of
Oh.
pharmacy, so she's got.
Oh, it's a great pharmacy program.
So Marie was, my father was the St. John's Prep, St. John's College, St. John's Law, and then went to NYU Law for his master's.
I'll get your phone number after here.
Yeah, and then Marie was St. John's undergrad as well, so,
Excellent.
yeah.
Any other questions from the committee? So what we're going to do from here is, we're not going to make any decisions obviously today, but we will probably convene next month at our meeting and hopefully render a decision then.
And I could just,
Mary?
Are there any time constraints that you know of? at
yes
this moment?
and no, okay? So I would say, no, the statute of limitations is ongoing, but in New York, you can only look back so far. So in the general business law, which is one of our claims for deceptive marketing, you can look back 6 years. So every day you wait, you're potentially losing that on the back end, the earlier 6 years in a day. So you're losing potential cost recovery. And as people switch from pills to heroin, it's going to get harder and harder on causation to go back. So that's one concern. The second concern is there are a number of AGs, New York's AG, Schneiderman included, who have band together and said they're going to try to resolve the issues for the states and try to incorporate the counties and cities in it. And what we've seen is varying degrees in different states. Some states like New York, the counties got some money and have some say in some money that they get from tobacco settlement. Other states, they got nothing whatsoever. And even though there were county expenses, they got nothing. So there is a fear that they can do something before. And what we've seen in tobacco, like Nevada, which we're interviewing with Las Vegas, they never sued on tobacco. And at the end, when the money, the $250 billion was put out, they got a very small amount for a comparable city and state around the country. But those that were already in it sort of grandfathered in, for lack of a better word. And first, the defendants would be crazy not to include the counties in the negotiation if you filed suit. And second, if you filed suit, you don't look like a Johnny-come-lately. You can intervene and to get your fair share if need be.
So basically...
So that's we don't know, because he won't tell us what he's doing or filing. I know that A.G. DeWine from Ohio announced like a 12-step initiative the other day and said that he wanted Cardinal Health and the 2 other distributors to pay, and that they gave him 30 days to do it. Does that mean that he's talking to Cardinal Health, which is right down the block from him in the AG's office, or is he just throwing something out there? The people, and we represent a lot of counties in Ohio, the people, or local people in Ohio in politics in Cleveland, the district attorney who knows all the politics, says that, he would not just say that unless all the AGs were actually doing something. He's very politically savvy. So, it's a little bit of reading tea leaves, but that's as much as I know.
So you just want to be on file before their settlement
And
negotiations, so the state doesn't usurp your damages.
It
and
would
not
take
give
us
you-
24 hours to file the case, if that long, because we have the master pleading done. We've already negotiated a short form pleading with the defendants and the court. So all we have to do is fill in the blanks of the county and a couple of specifics, and we could have it filed in the courthouse right here where we file it in 24 hours with your assistance.
So maybe if the acting county administrator doesn't have any other ideas, I'm thinking that maybe what we should do to get this for a board resolution for this month is to maybe have a special meeting.
We can do that. We have a Friday or tomorrow.
Tomorrow we have, but
Yeah.
I don't think we want to make a decision by tomorrow.
No, you have to-
But
I would
we'll try to get this done
recommend
sooner than
that.
later, yeah.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry to
Appreciate
have
it.
you.
Nice meeting you. No, hold on.
Nice meeting you. Take care.
Really good. We'll get through it.
Thank you.
Get through it really
Good
quick.
job.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Bye, ladies.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We gotta finish.
Okay, we still have an agenda, but we can get through this really quick. I did read through it, so there's nothing really that we have to worry about here.
Then I can go.
Okay, item 4 is... Oh, my God, thank you, yes. Item 1 is a request for transfer of funds as attached.
I'll make a motion.
Motion made by Supervisor
Second.
Garrity, second by Supervisor Dickinson, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. 4, request items to be discussed by the county treasurer. This was a request for a transfer of funds in the amount of...
This is for the machine. I'll make a motion, we approve the transfer.
Okay,
Second.
motion made by Supervisor Garrity, second by Supervisor Dickinson, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
Thank you.
Facilities, under airport, request to amend the county budget in the total amount of $6,041.50 to reflect the receipt of additional funding from the Adirondack Balloon Festival.
I'll move it.
Motion made by Supervisor Dickinson, second by Supervisor Garrity, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Can we move B and C together?
Sure.
I'll move those.
I'll second.
Motion made by Supervisor Dickinson and seconded by Supervisor Stroh, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. 6, referrals from the Criminal Justice and Public Safety under Office of Emergency Services. Request to amend the county budget in the amount of $1 to reflect the actual total of the Local Emergency Management Performance Grant Award.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Garrity, seconded by Supervisor Dickinson, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. These are all county budget items, so B, C, and D?
So
Made by
moved.
Sheriffs, made by Supervisor Simpson, seconded by Supervisor Dickinson, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. 7, from Economic Growth, under Planning and Community Development, request for a transfer of funds in the amount of $14,900 from the contingent account to pay for a portion of the updated imagery purchased from New York State, which
I'll
will be
move it.
paid. Motion made by
Second.
Supervisor Strauss, second by Supervisor Dickinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Okay, we started the day with $69,700 in contingency, and now we're down to about 49, so let's be careful. Public Works, DPW, we can move these both capital projects if you would like. Items A and B.
Second.
Okay, motion and made by Supervisor Garrity, seconded by...
No, it was Dixon.
Was it Dickinson? Okay.
To make a difference.
Motion made by Supervisor Dickinson, seconded by Supervisor Garrity. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. 9, really quick, Amanda.
We found the money somewhere else, we don't need contingent fund. It's a transfer of funds, we did it in item 1.
Done.
Thank you.
Done. Okay.
Number 10, County Administrator.
They're fine, the transfers are interdepartment.
11, Finance Committee action is required on the following items from Personnel and Higher Education. Those are items 2B,
I'll move.
C, 3, and 4.
I'll move
Motion made
the
by
personnel
Supervisor Garrity,
request.
second by Supervisor Simpson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Unbelievable that we just did. Treasurer, we'll hold off on this one.
Okay.
The pending item. We'll keep it on there for next month. I know
more committees.
I know Doug Beatty had to...
Can I take this as a...
Oh, really quick. hold
Super
on.
quickly, I'm going to bring a contract
They were,
through my
they
committee
were-
for the Westmount debt, to try
Excellent.
and collect it. So
Excellent.
you'll
Okay,
hear about that this month.
They were...
I want to...
Anything else? Privilege of the floor?
Real quick, I know that Emergency Services is pursuing that I am responding and moving along very nicely with that
That
one.
1.3 billion.
A lot of the
that's
fire
probably done.
departments are taking that. and then-
25% of 1.3 billion.
I think, well, we got the right people here, why not vote to the runway extension?
Oh, it's so big.
Motion to adjourn. Made by Supervisor Dickinson, second by Supervisor Stroud. All in favor?
I mean, I've never seen that.
I know, that's true.
We got the right people.